Good afternoon, ma'am.
गुड आफ्टरनून बेटा।
मैम किसी ने ज्वाइन ही नहीं किया अभी।
हाँ, किसी ने ज्वाइन नहीं अभी कल आए तो मोहित आ गए, पावनी आ गई। आप लोग का इंग्लिश का
Okay.
क्लास था आई बिलीव, हाँ इससे पहले।
Yes, ma'am.
चलो, तो हम एक काम करते हैं, ये वर्कशीट हम आपके साथ शेयर कर लेते हैं, ठीक है। ठीक है, ठीक है। आई एम शेयरिंग द स्क्रीन विद यू ऑल। आ गए बच्चे, काफी आ गए हैं, ठीक है।
Good afternoon, ma'am.
गुड आफ्टरनून गार्गी।
Good afternoon, ma'am.
गुड आफ्टरनून जिज्ञासा। तुम परेशान नहीं हुआ करो भाई, हमें पता है
Good
कौन बच्चे
afternoon,
जेन्युइन
ma'am.
की क्लास करते हैं, कौन बच्चे नहीं करते हैं। गुड आफ्टरनून बच्चा।
नहीं मैम, परेशान नहीं।
पक्का रहा।
हाँ मैम।
हाँ,
मैम सुबह वाली क्लास में मैं भी डिस्कनेक्ट हो गई थी लास्ट में।
अच्छा।
I'm actually revision.
हाँ।
कोई नहीं, वो एक्चुअली थोड़ा सा नेटवर्क का भी इशू चल ही रहा है, कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है,
यस मैम।
है ना। चलिए, हम आप लोगों को ले लिया है हमने अंदर, और हम आपके साथ स्क्रीन शेयर कर लेते हैं, ठीक है। चलिए, हमने कितने क्वेश्चंस डिस्कस कर लिए थे बेटा क्लास।
Ma'am, we were doing orally.
हाँ, नहीं तो
Yes, ma'am.
हाँ हाँ,
Yes,
पावनी
ma'am.
यू कैन पावनी यू कैन रीजॉइन, नो इश्यूज। ओके, हमने ओरली करे थे ना।
Yes, ma'am. Already we are discussing.
चलो, तो आई एम शेयरिंग द स्क्रीन विद यू। पता नहीं क्यों इतनी प्रॉब्लम हो रही है इसमें। एक्चुअली एवरीवन इज यूजिंग जूम, तो आई बिलीव इसी वजह से थोड़ा सा प्रॉब्लम भी हो रहा होगा, isn't it?
यस।
चलिए, Can you all see the screen?
Yes, ma'am,
Yes,
it's
ma'am.
visible.
Okay. इसमें से देख लो, इसमें से देख लो, जो क्वेश्चन हमने नहीं करे वो डिस्कस कर लेते हैं.
Ma'am, the second question.
What is that?
Why did Gandhiji organize Satyagraha in 1917 in Khera district of Gujarat?
Who will tell this answer?
Ma'am,
Yes.
Question.
Question number 2.
ma'am,
Yes.
Ma'am, Gandhiji organized Satyagraha in 1917 in Khera district of Gujarat to support the peasants who were affected by the crop failure and a plague epidemic.
ठीक है.
They couldn't pay the revenue and they were demanding for that the revenue collection should be relaxed for them.
Fine. Question number 3 we did, in which INC session the idea of Khilafat non-cooperation movement was accepted.
Yes, ma'am.
This we have done.
Yes, ma'am.
नहीं, ये नहीं करा था.
No, ma'am, we haven't done.
This was not done. वो दूसरा था. पूर्ण
मैम
स्वराज.
पूर्ण स्वराज वाला किया था.
पूर्ण स्वराज वाला किया था.
Okay, ma'am.
हाँ, ये वाला बताओ, ये वाला देखो कौन सा है.
Ma'am, in the Calcutta
Ma'am,
session of
Nagpur session.
In the Calcutta session 1920. In the Calcutta session. ठीक है.
Yes, ma'am.
Then ठीक है, ये वाला हो गया था, बिहार वाला हो गया था. Which act did not permit plantation workers हो गया था. Why was Simon Commission boycotted?
Ma'am, may I?
Ma'am, may I?
रुको. Let us have. चलो 1 मिनट रुको. जरा देखो कौन कौन क्लास में है. चलिए. नमन, are you there? बेटा नमन. नमन. Okay. We have Srishti Gautam. Srishti, are you there?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, just a minute.
Answer for this question. Why was Simon Commission boycotted?
Ma'am, may I
Ma'am,
try?
I'm unable to find the answer.
Okay, जिज्ञासा
Ma'am,
बताओ.
may I?
Ma'am, may I?
Let जिज्ञासा tell. जिज्ञासा बताओ.
Ma'am, Simon Commission was boycotted because it did not have a single Indian member. All the members were British. And when it arrived in India, it was greeted with the slogan, "Go back, Simon."
It was greeted with the slogan, Simon, go back. ठीक है? Everybody knows the same answer?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am, one
ma'am.
point we can also add.
Yes, what we can add? Please tell. No issues. Tell.
Ma'am, it was boycotted because the government showed no inclination towards accepting the demand
Of the
for
Indian.
Swaraj.
हाँ, ठीक है. ये भी आप लिख सकते हो. Then question number 7. Why did Gandhiji oppose the salt law? कर लिया था. Why did Dr. B.R. Ambedkar and Gandhiji clash at the second roundtable conference? ये भी कर लिया था. What was the main point of difference between the Congress and Muslim League? ये भी कर लिया था. Why did the nationalists in India tour villages? ये भी कर लिया था. Explain the idea of Satyagraha according to Gandhiji. I think ये भी कर लिया था हम लोगों ने.
Ma'am,
Yes,
we
Yes,
have
ma'am.
done all till 14.
All
Yes,
all
ma'am,
people
we
भी
have
clear
done
था.
all the question.
Yes, ma'am.
चलो नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन पे आते हैं.
Ma'am,
जी बेटा.
ma'am, can you please share this worksheet on the class group?
हाँ, ये कर देंगे, आप बिल्कुल निश्चिंत रहो. चलिए क्वेश्चन नंबर 15.
मैम आप एक बार क्वेश्चन नंबर 14 डिस्कस कर लेंगे, मैं कंफ्यूज हो गई.
ठीक है. Mention the main proposals with reference to non-cooperation movement as suggested by Mahatma Gandhi.
Ma'am, may I?
Yes, beta Gargi.
Ma'am, the main proposals with reference to non-cooperation movements as suggested by Mahatma Gandhi were: first, that the movement should unfold in stages. Second, it should begin with the surrender of titles that the government awarded. Third, a boycott of civil services, army, police, courts, and legislative councils.
ठीक है. Clear? जिज्ञासा?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, next question is, explain any three problems faced by the peasants of Awadh. Explain any three problems faced Who will tell this answer?
Ma'am, may I try?
Yes, Pavni.
May I?
चलो हिमांशु इसके बाद आप. ठीक है.
A number of problems were faced by the peasants in Awadh. First, the movement in Awadh was against talukdars and landlords who demanded from peasants high rent and other taxes. Second, the peasants had to do begar and work at landlord's farm without any payment. Third, peasants demanded for reduction of revenue, abolition of begar, and the social boycott of oppressive landlords.
ठीक है. Any other point to be added in this?
No, ma'am.
Why did some leaders of the Congress oppose the idea of non-cooperation movement?
Ma'am, I think we did this question.
We have
Ma'am,
done?
we did this.
Yes, ma'am,
ma'am.
we did.
I thought the class got over that. We could not discuss this answer. We discussed.
Ma'am, we discussed.
Ma'am, we
Yes,
discussed.
ma'am.
Then it is fine. चलिए next question. How did different groups of people interpret the idea of Swaraj? How did different groups of people interpret the idea of Swaraj?
Ma'am, in this question, we have to mention about like in rural areas, in middle class, ma'am, all these groups.
Yes, you have to tell about the different groups.
Ma'am, may I?
Okay, you would
Ma'am, may
try. चलो करो. एक मिनट रुको. पुनीत,
Yes, ma'am.
इसका आंसर बताओ.
And Swaraj for plantation workers means the right to move quickly in and out of the confined space in which they were enclosed.
हाँ. ठीक है.
And ma'am,
चलो अच्छा रुको. Can we have Naina telling this answer?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, the different groups of people interpret the ideas of Swaraj as follows. First, middle class. For them, Swaraj was spreading education and a share in administration. For the peasants, the reduction of land revenues was the Swaraj, mainly for the small peasants. For the tribals, getting traditional rights over forest and uh, living in their areas from their choice was Swaraj.
ठीक है. See in this question, चलो ठीक है. Can we have Pavni also
Ma'am.
answering? Can we have Pavni also answering the same question?
Yes, ma'am.
अब बताओ.
Ma'am, the different groups of people interpreted the idea of Swaraj differently. Ma'am, first, the economic. First, that the peasants, for the peasants and tribals, they joined the movement so that for the demand of decrease in their revenue.
Okay.
Second, tribal peasants, they revolted against the enclosure of large forest tracts by the British government, which left them devoid of a livelihood. And for the plantation workers, they desired freedom to move about and retain links with the villages they came from.
ठीक है. ठीक है. जो नैना ने बताया वो आंसर भी ठीक है. पावनी ने जो बताया वो भी ठीक है. Gargi, do you have any other points for the same answer?
Yes, ma'am, about the business class.
हाँ, बताओ.
Ma'am, for the business class, the term Swaraj means a time when colonial restrictions on business would no longer exist and trade and industry would flourish without constraints.
ठीक है. You can add this point as well. Otherwise, what Nana has told and what Pavni has told, both the answers are perfect, right? You simply have to tell that how, every social group took this idea of Swaraj, which was initiated by Gandhiji. I hope I am clear.
Yes, ma'am.
Chaliye, next question. Explain the incident which forced Gandhiji to call off the non-cooperation movement. Himanshu. Himanshu?
Yes, ma'am.
Batao.
The Chauri Chauraya incident forced Gandhiji to call off the movement. The incident of Chauri Chauraya occurred in Gorakhpur of United Province, and a large group of protesters participating in non-corporation corporation movement clashed with police, who opened fire. And ma'am,
आपको बताना पड़ेगा.
ma'am, actually I'm facing problem.
चलो ठीक है. कोई नहीं.
Ma'am, may I?
Yes, Gargi, बताओ.
May I?
एक मिनट पुनीत. गार्गी को बताने दो, फिर आप बता दीजिएगा.
Ma'am, the incident at Chauri Chaura in Gorakhpur led Mahatma Gandhi to call a halt to the non-cooperation movement. In Chauri Chaura, a peaceful demonstration in a bazaar turned into a violent clash with the police, and the angered protestants set the police station on fire when 22 policemen were killed. Mahatma Gandhi wanted a non-violent movement, and on getting the news, he felt that the movement was turning violent in many places, and the satyagrahis needed to be trained properly. So, in February 1922, he called off the movement.
आप ये लिख सकते हो. ठीक है बेटा. देखो, जब आप ये बताओगे, अगर जब ये क्वेश्चन आएगा तो आप इसमें आपको पहले एक्सप्लेन करना है कि किस तरीके से नॉन कोऑपरेशन को कॉल ऑफ किया गया, बिकॉज इट टर्न्ड वायलेंट. अब वो वायलेंट होने में एग्जैक्टली क्या हुआ कि भाई 22 पुलिसमैन they were burnt, right, during a procession that was taking place by the satyagrahis, right? And where it happened, name of the place That also you have to specify, and then write the date on which this non-cooperation movement was called off by Gandhiji, right? Right, class? चलिए, अभी next question. How non-cooperation was different from civil disobedience? And who will tell? Okay, Mohit will tell. Mohit Gangwar, बताओ बेटा.
Ma'am, in NCM, people were asked to refuse cooperation with the British, but
Okay.
with the civil disobedience movement, people not only refused to cooperate with them, they also broke their colonial laws.
ठीक है, very good. और बताओ, अगर ये 3 मार्क्स का क्वेश्चन है तो उसमें और बाकी पॉइंट्स और क्या लिखोगे आप? दोनों के लॉन्चिंग टाइम डिफरेंट थे.
Yes, ma'am.
नॉन कोऑपरेशन किस एक और मूवमेंट के साथ लॉन्च किया गया था? इट वाज मर्ज्ड विद अनदर मूवमेंट, नो? यस और नो?
Yes, ma'am.
हाँ, ठीक है.
And Muslim participation is more in NCM.
Muslim participation was more in non-cooperation, whereas the civil disobedience did not see much of the participation of the Muslims, right?
Muslims. Yes.
Right? जैसे जो आपका नॉन कॉपरेशन था, अगर हम बात करते हैं नॉन कॉपरेशन की, तो नॉन कॉपरेशन वाज सपोर्टेड बाय ऑल द सोशल ग्रुप्स, वेयरएज सिविल डिसोबीडियंस वाज कन्फाइंड टू वेरी फ्यू सोशल ग्रुप्स. ठीक है, बहुत कम थे जो लोग इसमें पार्टिसिपेट जिन्होंने किया था सिविल डिसोबीडियंस को, राइट?
Yes, ma'am.
ये जनरली 5 मार्क्स के लिए भी आता है ये क्वेश्चन. तो आई एम रीडिंग आउट द पॉइंट्स, all the 5 points that are there for this particular question. सबसे पहला non-cooperation was launched between 1920 to 1922, while the civil disobedience movement continued from 1930 to 1934. इन दोनों के लॉन्चिंग जो टाइम थे वो अलग थे, ठीक है. Non-cooperation was launched because of the anger of the Jallianwala Bagh tragedy, whereas the civil disobedience movement was launched to protest the arrival of the Simon Commission. ठीक है. Then non-cooperation started with the surrendering of the titles, boycott of the British institutions, whereas the civil disobedience movement began with the defying and breaking of the colonial laws like the salt law. सबसे पहले नमक कानून ही तो छोड़ा था इन लोगों ने, ठीक है.
Yes, ma'am.
Then non-cooperation aimed for the Swaraj or self-government, whereas the civil disobedience demanded complete independence or Poorn Swaraj. Clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Then
Yes, ma'am.
non-cooperation got the support of all the sections of the society, whereas the civil disobedience was confined only to the few social groups, namely Dalits, Muslims, industrial workers, businessmen did not participate fully in that. Okay. I think these 5 points are clear and understood to all of you.
Yes,
जी?
ma'am.
अब
Yes,
एक क्वेश्चन है. Explain the reasons for the lukewarm response explain the reasons for the lukewarm response of some Muslim organizations to the civil disobedience. This is also another important question. Batao.
Ma'am, may I?
Yes, Gargi.
Ma'am, may I?
Let Gargi try first. Yes, Gargi.
Some Muslim organizations were lukewarm in their response to the civil disobedience movement because of the following reasons. First, after the decline of the non-cooperation Khilafat movement, a large section of the Muslims felt alienated from the Congress. Second, the Congress came to be more visibly associated with the openly Hindu religious nationalist groups like Hindu Mahasabha.
Very good.
Third, riots started taking place between Hindus and Muslims, which deepened the distance between the two communities.
ठीक है. Very
Fourth,
good.
the Muslim leaders feared that in a Hindu-dominated country, the identity of the minority groups like Muslims would be submerged under the domination of the Hindu majority.
Right.
Third, they wanted a fair representation in the legislatures, but all the hopes were dismissed when M.R. Jacker of the Hindu Mahasabha strongly opposed the idea.
ठीक है. Very good. इसमें आप एक पॉइंट और डाल सकते हो कि जो आपका वो था सिविल डिसोबीडियंस जो था, जब उसको कॉल ऑफ किया गया तो देयर वाज नो लाइक व्हाटएवर वाज एक्सपेक्टेड फ्रॉम द सिविल डिसोबीडियंस, उसका एज सच कोई बहुत ज्यादा जो है मतलब रिजल्ट समझ में नहीं आया. इस वजह से भी दे वर लिटिल ल्यूकवार्म इन देयर रिएक्शंस टुवर्ड्स द सिविल डिसोबीडियंस. ठीक है भाई. नॉन कोऑपरेशन से जो उम्मीदें थी, नॉन कोऑपरेशन एकदम से बंद कर दिया गया बिकॉज ऑफ दैट वायलेंट एक्टिविटी. तो मुस्लिम्स को ये लगा कि भाई जो हिंदूज हैं दे शो दैट दे आर विद मुस्लिम्स, बट देन एक्चुअल में वो उनके साथ नहीं है बिकॉज खिलाफत मूवमेंट को इस तरीके से एब्रप्टली बंद करने की वजह से उनके सेंटिमेंट्स को जो है चोट पहुंची थी. इस वजह से उन्हें लगा कि भाई जो भी मूवमेंट्स लॉन्च हो रहे हैं उसमें कहीं ना कहीं केवल मोटिव ये है कि भाई हिंदूज का जो बेनिफिट मिले, मुस्लिम्स की वेलबींग के बारे में कुछ ऐसा ज्यादा सोचा नहीं जा रहा है बाय द इनिशिएशन ऑफ दीज नेशनलिस्ट मूवमेंट्स. राइट.
Yes, ma'am.
ये सारे पॉइंट्स एकदम परफेक्ट हैं. वेरी गुड. ठीक है. देन एक और क्वेश्चन था, रुको हम बता रहे. अच्छा, ये क्वेश्चन भी बहुत कॉमन आता है बेटा. Why did the non-cooperation movement gradually slow down in towns and cities? Why did the non-cooperation movement gradually slow down in towns and cities? बताओ. Any one of you?
Ma'am, may I?
चलो पावनी try.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, the non-cooperation movement gradually slowed down in towns and cities because of the following reasons. First, that the khadi cloth was more expensive than the mill cloth and could not be afforded by the poor people. Second, after the boycott of British institutions, there were no alternative institutions which were set up, because of which people had to return to these institutions, and students and teachers started to return back to the government schools, whereas the lawyers joined back in the courts.
ठीक है. Perfect. ये 3 marks में भी आ जाता है, 5 marks में भी आ जाता है. You can always give all these points, right? Then there is a question: what marked the beginning of civil disobedience by Mahatma Gandhi? What marked What marked the beginning of civil what marked the beginning of civil disobedience by Mahatma Gandhi? बताओ.
Ma'am, the breaking of the salt law.
अगर ये 3 मार्क्स का है तो आप इसको कैसे बताओगे?
Ma'am, for this we can explain that how did this salt march start and
Yes.
what were the reasons?
You can directly start with the salt law, that as by initiating the salt law, the Britishers had already taken the monopoly of manufacturing salt, which raised the which gave a rise in the prices of the salt. And salt was something जो आप लोगों ने पहले उसके लिए बताया था, फिर ये चीजें आप उसमें ऐड ऑन करके 3 मार्क्स में आप इसको कंप्लीट कर सकते हैं. Am I clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. कोई ऐसी चीज, कोई ऐसा क्वेश्चन जो आप लोगों को लग रहा हो कि, या कोई ऐसा टॉपिक जो आप लोगों को लग रहा हो कि आप लोगों को नहीं समझ में आया, आपको अभी भी उसको करने की जरूरत है? हाँ.
Ma'am, this one, the limits of civil disobedience.
What were the?
Ma'am, the limits of civil disobedience.
अच्छा, जो wait, you have the books with you?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
चलिए हम आपको बता दे रहे हैं. लिमिट्स ऑफ सिविल डिसोबीडियंस में आपका पता है क्या आएगा? जो भी सेकंड पार्ट दिया गया है. वेट, ओपन पेज नंबर 2. एक तो लिमिट्स में आपका ये आ जाएगा कि पहले तो जो दलित्स थे, दे वर नॉट पार्ट ऑफ द नॉन ऑफ द सिविल डिसोबीडियंस. ठीक है. मुस्लिम्स वर आल्सो नॉट पार्ट ऑफ इट. अब मुस्लिम्स क्यों नहीं थे, उसमें रीजन बता दीजिएगा कि भाई बिकॉज नॉन कोऑपरेशन वाज कॉल्ड ऑफ abruptly, and it Muslims were now not able to trust these nationalist movements and the Congress leaders, because they thought that whatever is initiated by them does not reach the final, and ultimately in between only the things are called off. Like non-cooperation was called off in between only, without finally getting its fate. Then industrial workers, their demands were to rise the wages, but then because the Congress leaders, if they would have supported these workers, they would have lost the trust of the businessmen, the owners, right? Then the businessmen also had certain limitations, because after the Second World War, when again the Britishers, they took over the business they took over the industries which were there. Moreover, whatever was expected by the civil disobedience, when it was called off in between, these business class, they felt that the Congress leaders, again, they are not in support of them. Poor peasantry class was not in support of the civil disobedience, because the rich peasants, they were in support of the Congress, and Congress never wanted to do away with the trust of the rich peasants, because rich peasants were supporting the Congress members. So they never wanted to break the trust of these rich peasants. That is why the poor peasants were not in favor. And moreover, whatever was demanded by the poor peasant, that was not fulfilled by the civil disobedience movement. They wanted reduction in the revenue and the taxes that were taken by them. तो वो सब कुछ ऐसा कैंसिल हुआ ही नहीं, कुछ भी, मतलब सब कुछ एज इट इज चल रहा था. ठीक है. बेगार वगैरह जो था वो सब एज इट इज था, उसमें कुछ चेंजेस आए नहीं थे. तो दीज वर द लिमिट्स ऑफ द सिविल डिसोबीडियंस. फिर दूसरा, हाँ, मेन तो यही रीजन है. दलित्स का पार्टिसिपेशन नहीं था क्योंकि सारे के सारे हाई क्लास हिंदू ब्राह्मण्स थे उसके अंदर. तो कांग्रेस को लगता था अगर वो दलित्स का पार्टिसिपेशन करवाएंगे तो कहीं ना ऐसा ना हो कि भाई जो है उनकी नाराजगी को उनको बेयर करना पड़े. राइट?
Yes, ma'am.
ठीक है.
Yes, ma'am.
और बताओ.
Ma'am, I couldn't find this industry point in the book.
It is there only, no?
Ma'am, like I can very well see the Dalit part and the part where Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, his point clashed with Mahatma Gandhi. And then I can see the point of where Muslims felt alienated because of the Hindu majority.
Poor peasantry also. See the industrialist, no? Page 66, first paragraph, last 4-5 lines. They were apprehensive of the spread of militant activities and worried about prolonged disruption of business as well as of growing influence of socialism amongst the younger members of the Congress. The failure of the roundtable conference business groups were no longer uniformly enthusiastic. Got these lines?
Yes, ma'am. Okay.
Okay. Then poor peasantry also it is written. Even the rich peasants were also disappointed by the civil disobedience because they felt that, you know, they don't have to give rents, they don't have to give revenue to the British, but then ऐसा कुछ हो नहीं पाया. Civil disobedience launch तो हो गया, पर जो भी laws थे वो सब as it is prevalent थे. उसमें कुछ बहुत ज़्यादा जो है large scale पे कोई changes आ नहीं पाए. ठीक है?
Yes, ma'am.
Right? Chaliye, any other question, any other point, any other topic?
Ma'am, reluctant means to disagree.
हाँ, बिल्कुल.
Ma'am, so can you add this women point like above the limits of civil disobedience? There's a line
Yes, speaker
that the Congress was reluctant to allow women to hold any position of authority within the organization.
बिल्कुल.
It was only on their symbolic presence.
बिल्कुल, बिल्कुल आप बता सकते हो. Though the civil disobedience saw a lot of participation of women, but still क्योंकि कांग्रेस members जो थे वो लोग नहीं चाहते थे that women should be given, you know, eminent positions. उनको लग रहा था कि भाई घर के फ्रंट पे वो काम करती है वही बहुत है, यहाँ पे अब क्या करेंगे, है ना? Right? Yes, Pavni?
No, ma'am, this much.
Okay, मोहित कुछ कह रहे हैं? Mohit wants to say something?
No, ma'am.
Okay. चलिए, अब हम लोग कल अगर देखते हैं, if possible, I will take one. What do you have in 5th period tomorrow, class? Beta, what do you have in 5th period tomorrow?
Ma'am, chemistry.
Acha. Will it be okay if I take it from sir, or you want your doubts to be cleared?
You can take foundation.
Huh?
Ma'am, you could take the 6th period.
Foundation.
6th period.
Yes, ma'am. 6th
What do
period.
you have in 6th period tomorrow? अच्छा चलो ठीक है. 6th period is
Ma'am,
your
6th is foundation.
foundation. चलो, I'll see to it. I'll see if I'll be